So I'm talking today about PopCap's experience entering the China market. I'm PopCap's general manager for Asia Pacific. I moved out to the region in 2004 in 2008 in order to open up PopCap's operation. We've been there almost 5 years now. So it's been a really fun time. And actually, I'm going to lose the heads. I don't think I really need that. Let's take this off. Feels kind of weird. Okay, this is better. So talking about PopCap's experiences. This is my favorite quote about doing business in China. Anything is possible, nothing is easy. I think it's a really good representation of doing business in China because it's absolutely true. It's a really difficult market, and we've certainly learned a lot in making that possible. So my whole story in China started back in 2005. PopCap bought my company, Sprout Games, back in 2005. I became their head of business development. And one of the very first things I did is headed over to Asia to see sort of what was going on. So I still remember I took part in a trade mission, my first ever government trade mission, where the state of Washington flew me and a few other developers over to China for 5 days of meetings. It was a really packed series of sessions. And what was interesting was how popular I discovered PopCap's games already were in China. So this is the photograph from an internet cafe in Shanghai. I just walked in and look, there's someone playing Zuma. Same cafe, look here, someone playing Feeding Frenzy, one of my own games. I was walking through a subway station. A little bit later, I heard the sounds of Zuma. I found the source. It was this person playing Zuma in a subway station. You go to a bookstore, here's someone, Ten Kwai, a CD-ROM with all of our games. So what was amazing to me was our games had already made it to China despite no localization, no marketing, no promotional efforts from PopCap. So this is the power of piracy at work. So that's a good thing, right? What was also interesting at the same time was the companies I visited that were actually making money were all making money with microtransactions and these kind of business models that at the time were really kind of shocking to us. So these are some sample games from Tencent. So the top left showed a multiplayer version of actually kind of a clone of Zuma. On the right side, you showed their avatar chatting room and some microtransaction items. And again, to me, you have to think back. In 2005, the idea of making money by selling virtual items was like revolutionary. Now it's hard to imagine just 7 years ago how crazy a notion that was. So what I did is I came back to Seattle and I ran around PopCap for several weeks telling anyone who would listen to me, it's amazing, they love our games and we have also opportunity and yet all we have to do to make this possible is change our business models. We can't try to sell content. We're going to have to make new games that are free to play, microtransaction and freemium. And everyone sort of laughed at me and said, well, which of our 1995 try and buy games do you want to cancel to free up resources to go after this crazy freemium market? Because everyone knows no one in North America is ever going to want to pay for a game with free-to-play items. So taking a page out of the same quote from the Kabam thing, Innovator's Dilemma said that if you're going to enter a brand new market, one of the only really successful ways to do it is to build a whole new studio from scratch over in that market and basically spin it off as an independent entity. And so that's exactly what we realized we would have to do. To be successful in China as PopCap, we could not do it from Seattle. We were going to have to build a separate team somewhere else to actually go off and pursue this opportunity. So one of the most useful things we did, one of the most critical things we did, is I hired, this photograph here was taken from China back in 2006. On the left, that guy's Wei Ming Lu. Wei Ming was, at the time I hired him, a 20-year-old student in Seattle who had moved there from China a few years ago, and I hired him as my research assistant to basically play games in China just to let me know what was even going on in the market. And he rapidly he started traveling with me as my interpreter, and he became essentially my first kind of biz dev guy in China, helping me get eyes and ears in the market in a way that I, as a Westerner speaking and reading no Chinese, would never be able to do. So he became a really critical kind of first step into the market. And then what we did is we then traveled around and studied other Western companies who'd been there before us. And ironically, EA was one of those companies that had been in China for a while and had never really made it a big success of it. In fact, I made this slide prior to our acquisition by EA, talking about sort of the lessons we learned from studying EA's missteps in China. I called this my mock kind of Harvard Business Review case study of EA in China. You probably can't read it there. There are 5 lessons we learned from what EA had done there. One lesson was they didn't listen enough to their local staff. EA had hired some amazingly talented people in China. In fact, many people now in leadership jobs in China worked at EA at one time or another. but a lot of the decisions were still being made back in their headquarters in California, and they were not really sufficiently empowering their local staff to make those key decisions. So that was actually a second lesson, which was another misstep they made, is all of their key decisions had to be approved back in headquarters. And when you're asking your headquarters back in North America to make decisions about your local market, that's a tough thing. So number 3, changing management too often. They had a series of general managers. It's tough. Every time you change the managers, they want to change the strategy. So that was a challenge. A little bit of we'll call it humility issues. A lot of time, Western companies are so confident they know how to be successful. When they go to a new market, they try to take too many of those lessons with them instead of coming in humble and saying, look, we don't know this market. We're beginners here. We're kind of starting over. And finally, they had a misstep with a local partner that was far more powerful than they had recognized. They kind of almost did a deal, didn't do the deal, and then the partner effectively blocked their ability to get licenses in China for several years until they finally resolved those issues. So all lessons learned. Coming out of those lessons, we then built kind of our own strategy for China, which is the following. So number 1, we're in Asia for Asia. We're not going to China to build games as a cheaper source of low-cost talent. We're going to China to make games in China for China. And that's a really key part of our strategy. Another thing was this notion of local decision-making. We took that to heart. We decided that the local team we built would have 100% local decision-making power. The only decision that would be approved back in headquarters was once a year our budgets would be approved. But other than that, hiring, firing, anything we want to do with our IP, we are free to do as long as the kind of quid pro quo is what happens in Asia stays in Asia. So we couldn't kind of build some crazy new version of Plants vs. Zombies, let's say, and take it back to North America. We had to kind of stick there in China. We looked at acquiring a local studio as a way of getting started. A lot of Western companies often look at acquisitions as a way to enter new markets. We realized it wouldn't work. Local studios were either too expensive, didn't have the right culture fit, didn't get PopCap's values, and so we decided to build organically, which took longer, but ultimately I think gave us a better team. We recognize the power of local partners. Not only, of course, legally do we have to operate through local partners for regulatory reasons, but we knew what we didn't know. We knew that partnering with great companies would be a great way to learn more quickly. We decided not to try and innovate gameplay. We were not going to go to China and build brand new games completely from scratch, at least not at first. But we were going to innovate on the business models. So the goal was to use China and use Asia actually as a test bed for free-to-play business models in ways that we could then take that learning back to North America. Now the irony, of course, all this is that the first free-to-play game launched from PopCap was not launched by my team in China. It was actually launched on Facebook when the Bejeweled team launched Bejeweled Blitz on Facebook as a free-to-play game. But we had, subsequently the following freemium titles. In fact, we have more freemium titles being published in Asia now than our North American team does. But that's changing rapidly. Of course, everyone in the industry now is jumping on freemium, and both PopCap and EA are not exceptions to that. And then finally, we decided to try and be cash flow positive from the start. A lot of companies go in, they spend a ton of money, they maybe don't make profits as quickly as they thought. Asia becomes this big gaping pool of red ink. Headquarters is looking for ways to cut costs, and then suddenly this China, it seems like a big way to cut costs. So we decided we wanted to be profitable from the start. And I'm happy to say this strategy has basically stood up now for 4 years. We have made no changes to it with the exception of in Asia for Asia has now become in China for China, in Japan for Japan, and so on. Because what we recognize, of course, is that each of these markets is far more different from each other. There's no such thing as an Asian market. China and Japan and Korea are completely different markets. And while this presentation today talks only about China, we do have a big team in Japan now. We've got 12 people in Japan. We've actually been very successful there as well, and following really the same strategy. Okay, going to China, very easy. Here's 9 easy steps to operating in China. You basically buy yourself a one-way ticket, you find a lawyer, you find an office, you file a lot of paperwork. The government gives you what's called a WFOE, a wholly foreign-owned enterprise. You hire an English-speaking assistant, you open your bank account, you transfer in a lot of money, you wait, and then you hire employees. And that's it. It's very easy. Anyone can follow these steps. We did. And in fact, this was our very first office in China. It was an apartment by that guy, Wei Ming, the young guy. We literally started out of the apartment he rented for himself in Shanghai. That was 2008. We had, I think, 4 employees back then. Fast forward to today, here's a recent photograph of our team. We've got almost 70 people now in a very nice office, two floors of a tower in downtown Shanghai. It's a really fun group, great office. It looks a lot like PopCap's. So if you walk in, this is what you'll see, kind of a bejeweled shaped desk. We've got a big pantry area, which is multi-use space. We've got teams doing daily huddles and Scrum and Agile development, and a pretty busy office. So it will feel like any other PopCap office around the world, which we're quite proud of. Our business there has grown quite a bit. When I first started in APAC, revenues were less than 1% of PopCap's global total. Last year, APAC was 12% of PopCap's global total. And we're projecting that by 2016, APAC plus Europe will be more than half of our revenues. And that's our target. Our target is to get to global, meaning outside of North America, to be more than half the revenues, which is something. In fact, I'm kind of competing with the guy in Europe to see which of us can be more of the. Right now, Europe is still beating APAC, but we're catching up fast. So just some representative projects, some samples of the kinds of things we've done in Asia. In 2011, last year, was the first year we really launched big projects. Merchandising has been a really surprising growth area for PopCap. I'll talk about that in a second. In fact, let me show you some slides from that. So merchandising. So one of the ways we knew merchandising would be big in China was just watching the pirate markets again. Piracy is a great predictor of what markets want, right? Because if people are buying and selling, Plants vs. Zombies T-shirts, you know that there's a market there. And we were frankly late to that ourselves. So we've since then done huge deals with some big brand names in clothing lines, trading cards, books. We even have I've seen people walking wearing like PVC slippers around the office. We've done some really cool stuff. Now, so Plants vs. Zombies is by far our biggest brand in China. It hit some sort of cultural nerve in China that we never could have predicted. Whereas Bejeweled is our biggest brand most parts of the world, in China, Plants vs. Zombies is just huge. You can't go anywhere without stumbling across it. So when we did launch, for example, our clothing deal with Meters Banwei being kind of like the Gap of China. They have 3,000 retail outlets in China. We did a test launch in their flagship shop in Shanghai. We advertised on a Weibo. We had a line of like 400, 500 people waiting outside the shop for the sale to open. You can see a screenshot here of the kind of the way we decorated the space. We broke apparently the Meters Banwei records. We were selling 10 SKUs a minute for the first hour of the sale, which blew past all their expectations and their records. And then following that, they then actually launched we had a big fashion show in August where they invited all their buyers for all their outlets to Shanghai to basically see the new fall collection. And I don't think PopCap and fall collection had ever been used together. And this is actually a video from that collection. You've never seen this before. I guarantee these fashion models have never had a gig like this before. All right, we get the idea. So that was our fashion show. We've done audiobooks. These are some covers from a whole series of storybooks we've done based on PVZ for China. And we've even done some successful IP enforcement raids. So we kept seeing these fake Plants vs. Zombies stuffed toys in various shops around China. We several times actually tried to contact them, and they put their label on these. They had their name on these stuffed toys. So we went to the company and said, look, you obviously have great distribution. Licensed IP from us will be very happy. They basically said, screw you. So we said, all right, screw you. And we actually went in and had a successful raid of their factory. We confiscated several 100,000 stuffed animals. We're still pending. Exact details are still pending, but you can fight piracy if you are determined enough. And actually, it's a great way to just kind of see where where it takes you. On the product side, we were successful with localization. So we localized the Plants vs. Zombies iOS game in China. And even though selling iOS games is not a great business model, you can still make actually a fair amount of money. We were very, very surprised how many people actually were buying this game. We had a bet going on. You can see the blue line here is the number of units being sold of the English language version of PVZ in China. And we had basically assumed that these were all like expats, because what Chinese person is actually going to buy PVZ on iPhone? So when we localized and launched the Chinese version, we had a bet on, are we going to see 0 sales, or are we going to have like 10 sales? And in fact, the red line there is the Chinese version. You can see actually we more than doubled the sales from where we were with English to Chinese. So actually, by localizing to Chinese, we actually sold more copies, which was unexpected. Now, there's still like a 10-to-1 ratio of sold copies to pirated copies, and free-to-play is definitely the way to go. But if all you've got is a premium title and it's a good title, you can still make decent money selling the app. There we are, number 1 on the App Store. We've actually been in the top 10 pretty much ever since we launched that. Another lesson we learned is the importance of being very local. So this is, on the left you see Plants vs. Zombies Social, which is a version we launched on RenRen, which is one of the big social networks last year. On the right you see PVZ Online, which is a pirate, kind of a cloned, not cloned, it's basically a rip-off of PVZ. They actually use the name Plants vs. Zombies in Chinese, the same name we've trademarked, but not yet got trademarks. There's some dispute there. But anyway, our game on the left was a skill-based game. It was basically the same gameplay from PVZ, but now in a competitive format. On the right is a stats-based game where there's no gameplay involved at all. Your stats compared to the other person's stats, whoever's stats are higher basically wins the battle. And that game, frankly, was making more money than ours was. So we learned a lot from that, which is, you need to really go local, right? It's not enough to just, we thought we were already localizing the game a lot for China. We weren't actually localizing it, frankly, enough. And these guys, by the way, were pirating everything. I mean, here's an Avatar-based zombie in there. They have Mario zombies. But again, they really, there's a lot of lessons you can learn here, right? And this is a very, very local take on it, and it's been very successful. And so we've now learned from that and gone far more local ourselves. So we actually have a version of Plants vs. Zombies called the Great Wall Edition, which just came out actually like 5 days ago. And sales are already greater than any game we've launched yet in China. In fact, Gary, are you? We're going to show a quick demo of this now, if it works. Just to kind of give you a quick show you what this actually looks like. Let's test it out.
As James said, we really want to get closer to, incorporating Chinese elements in the game. All right, if you take a look at the build, let me go back a little bit. Right, you have the Chinese. This is 中国馆, Chinese pavilion in the main menu now, and in there you have Chinese mode. One of them. Don't worry about the missing text. Basically, the stage is set on the Chinese Great Wall of China, and you have Chinese zombies, right, in terracotta uniform. And then if you can kind of see the purple guy jumping up a little bit right back there, that is a unique China-only zombie. All right, it's based off the Chinese culture. As you can see, he's got a little charm on the head, and the way he attacks is he'll throw that at your plant. If it lands, your plant will fall asleep. So it's a great way to incorporate the Chinese culture with PVZ, and we believe this type of integration is what our users want, is what we're bringing. So another great thing on the left, we had a lawnmower. That doesn't really make sense on the Great Wall of China. So we put firecrackers, right? Because in Chinese mythology, firecrackers is there to ward off evil. So the game, the way we designed this level, the way we're going forward with this project is really to bring that Chinese element to the game and let our users enjoy. And then you saw earlier basically the Zomboss. We've incorporated, the basically Qin Shi Huang, and he's a Zomboss for the level, right? So again, the Chinese element of the game is in our game. So
cool.
Yep.
Thanks, Gary.
All right.
Yeah, so now that is still and that game actually launched on Tencent. The version launched on Tencent actually is interesting because it's actually a microtransaction version. It's actually they call it the 422 bill. You basically pay 4 RMB to unlock a chunk of it, and then there's additional kind of like 2 RMB chunks you can purchase, and it uses an in-app purchase model. So even if it's pirated, we're still happy because it's free to play. It's free to distribute anyway, and it relies on the in-app purchase model, which is great. So that's been a lot of fun. And then we have a new game we announced. We have not yet announced a lot of details. We have a game we announced called Plants vs. Zombies Kingdoms, which is going to be our first really local version of Plants vs. Zombies. We have not announced details about this yet. All we've said is it's basically a Three Kingdoms game meets Plants vs. Zombies. And if you look on the left there is a recent top grossing list from China. The games in red are all Three Kingdoms games. The game in blue, that's Plants vs. Zombies. And so it's sort of like, if, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, if 8 of the top 10 grossing games are Three Kingdoms games, and one of them is Plants vs. Zombies, what if you combine them together? What do you get? And that's basically, that was the impetus between PvZ Kingdoms. It's still in development. It'll launch later this year. We're pretty excited to see what that game can do, which is fun. Okay, so some lessons learned really quickly. So what went right? A couple of things we did really well, I'm proud of. One, I think our strategy was a great strategy, especially that notion of having local decision making. It's helped us hire, frankly, some great talent, because a lot of the best talent, we say, look, you have a choice. You can work for a local company, and all they want to do is make money, and you don't really get a chance to build great games. Or you can come work for a Western company, which is maybe doing outsourcing, and they want to make great games, but you don't get to make local decisions. Or you come work for us, and you get to make local decisions and own your own product, and have your own and be building great games. And so that's kind of a winning combination. I'm not touting my own horn here, but just having a senior existing kind of PopCap old timer go over to open the operation was actually a big win, because it meant that when I had to make some tough decisions, I had the support already of our leadership in Seattle. If you hire someone from scratch to run an operation like this, it's challenging because they don't necessarily have the relationships to make some of the tough decisions and have them stick. We were patient, we've been stable. One of the reasons why we're seeing, frankly, some great resumes now is because we've been there long enough. They've come to trust that PopCap is not going to just give up and go away. We set modest expectations. We did not promise that we're going to make $50 million in China in year one. It's been kind of a slow growth. And we have been investing both in our studio team and our sales and operations team, because frankly, a lot of our early revenue wins didn't come from product, they came from business deals. And by having business deals and studio work closer together, we've been successful. Some things we didn't do so well. Frankly, our hiring bar wasn't high enough. I think we actually had to let go, especially recently, a fair number of folks who just weren't quite as good as we needed them to be. And I think part of that came in the beginning. We had heard so many, frankly, horror stories about hiring great leadership in China that we sort of set our bar a little bit low. And what we've come to realize is, no, actually, there is fantastic talent available. It's just really, really hard to find. And it just takes a lot more time in some cases. It's hard to really fault us in this. The one thing I will say is, some of the best talent won't join you, especially if you're a brand new team. When you're just a guy in a PowerPoint in a dream, it's very hard to hire the best talent. Because frankly, if you're risk averse, you're not going to join PopCap when it's just a PowerPoint. And if you're not risk averse, you're still not going to join PopCap, because you're going to go and start your own company with plenty of the capital available. You only to get the best talent that's maybe they have a family, they want stability, they're not willing to take those risks. They're not going to join you until you've already demonstrated a track record. So it's a bit of a catch-22. And then again, not being local enough. I mean, we've really learned now what it means to be local, and that's a key thing. We spent a fair amount of time, I would say kind of wasted a fair amount of time focusing on the PC download space, PC online space. PC online is still a big business, but it's a very mature, competitive business. Web and mobile is very much where the growth is, and that's frankly where we have a better competitive advantage anyway. So almost everything we're doing now is mobile in China. And finally, PopCap's got some great core values. I think when we first came over there, we were a little bit, I mentioned the importance of being humble and not being arrogant. I think we were almost too humble in terms of not being willing to apply kind of PopCap's core values to our studio. And the result was we had a very Chinese studio at first, which was a Chinese teams can often be closed to feedback. It's very difficult in China to speak up and talk back to your boss. It's a very hierarchical structure, and yet one of the great successes of PopCap is having a very open environment where people are encouraged to give feedback and encouraged to talk back. And so I think we initially weren't confident enough to push that. Now we are. And so now I would say that the core PopCap values, we consider those global values of the company. Those are non-negotiable. If you're going to work for us in China, it means you're going to be open to giving feedback, taking feedback, operating smart, not just hard, and a lot of other kind of values which we hold dear. So I guess the final message here, China and frankly Asia in general is a very large and rapidly moving market. I don't know if you can read that here. The boat is labeled Shanghai Babe, and the guy in the boat is a Westerner yelling bloody communist. But I think it is true. I think China is very much now the market that moves the world. We're proud to be there. We think it's an exciting market. It's not easy, but you learn a lot, and it's important. So with that, I'm going to really quickly I got 4 minutes to take questions. So you got a question, raise your hand. hand or come to a microphone and I'll call on you. I was that good, no questions. Okay. Yes, in the back.
What's your next step for the Asian market? I mean, are you going to stay in China and focus on China? Or are you going to move out from China and go to other places like?
Yeah, so the question is, are we going to spread out? So actually, we're already spread out. I'm talking today just China, but we have a big team in Japan. Japan's frankly one of our fastest growing markets, even faster than China, based on mobile social games. We've dealt with GRE and Mix and DNA and others. We have a team here, we've got here in Southeast Asia, and we're doing deals now here with MiG-33 and others down in Singapore and Southeast Asia, and we also have a team in Korea. So we're very much already across Asia, but each market is very different, and I just talked about China here today. But in terms of what's next, I mean, we are staying in China, we're investing in China, we're growing in China. You know, we're still the fastest growing part of PopCap right now, and we see that continuing. Okay, one more question. Yes?
Hi, you mentioned merchandise. Do you think merchandise is something that only really works for a game that already is very large and has established IP, or is it something that can be part of your growth strategy if you're trying to make a game, get it into people's heads?
It's a great question. So, can merchandising work if you don't yet have a brand? I would be skeptical, and the reason for that is you know, unless you have huge pockets, you're not going to invest in your own merchandise. You're going to find a partner to basically do that. And partners are not going to license, in our opinion, partners are not going to license your merchandise unless you can show them why paying you money for a license is going to give them a benefit. And that's really only possible if you've already got a strong brand. Now, it doesn't mean you don't have to be on the scale of Plants vs. Zombies for that to work. You know, I think you can do merchandising once you've got some sort of brand, but it's certainly challenging. And frankly, China's even more challenging because of how decentralized distribution can be there. It's probably easier to start with a smaller, lesser-known brand in the West, actually, where distribution is cheaper and more efficient. Okay, that's it. I'll be around afterwards. Here's my email and my Skype. Feel free to message me if you got questions. And thank you for the time today.